Hello and welcome back to Doctor Who, the cancelled years. In this video, we'll be covering season 36 of Doctor Who. So, let's get started. Season 36 would have been the last season for Hugh Bonneville as the Doctor, the first season for Helen Baxendale as Jean Robinson, and the last season for Keith Barnfield as executive producer, Lynn Grant as producer, and Colin Brake as script editor. This season would have marked the end of an era for the show. The new showrunner who would be taking over the show in season 37 was revealed to be Russell T Davies, who had written for the show on and off since season 30. A new companion would have debuted this season named Jean Robinson, as portrayed by Helen Baxendale. Jean would be very different to most previous companions, as she isn't from the modern day or an alien world, but instead the past, making her the first companion since Victoria to be from history, with Jean being from the 1950s. Like last season, the aspect ratio of the show was updated. Now the show would be airing in full 16:9. And now, let's get to the episodes. The first episode would have been The Smog, written by Alan Barnes. This would have been the first story for our new companion, Jean. This story would have dealt with the Great Smog of London in 1952, and shows that the smog was created by a race of aliens named the Vatrans, who want to conquer the Earth by polluting the planet with a gas known as lead Z. The story would have primarily focused on Jean as she tries to survive the smog, and then she meets the Doctor, and throughout the next 3 days ends up working with him to get rid of the lead Z and defeat the Vatrons by polluting the lead Z with nanogenes that eat away the lead Z and will eventually restore the atmosphere to normal. The story ends with Jean running away with the Doctor and joining him in the TARDIS, as she can't be bothered waiting for the smog to clear. The events of Jean joining the Doctor would kick-start the series arc, named the Web of Time arc. We learn that Jean was supposed to have been one of the many people who were killed by the fog. However, with her going off with the Doctor, she survives the smog, and history has been changed, causing the Web of Time to start cracking, as someone who should be dead now isn't dead. The second episode would have been Fire and Ice, written by Mark Gatiss. The story would have saw the return of the Ice Warriors. It would have saw a race of aliens known as the Magmaclin attempting to invade an Ice Warrior colony planet by rotating the planet's axis and rising the planet's temperature so that it kills the Ice Warriors. However, partway through the story, the Doctor makes a discovery. Thousands of years ago, the planet actually belonged to the Magmaclin, but then the Ice Warriors came along and rotated the planet's axis to make it cold for them, killing off the Magmaclin. And while the Ice Warriors the Doctor knows right now aren't the same ones who invaded the planet, he knows they technically shouldn't be there. So he's left with the question, does he help the Magmaclin reclaim their home, or does he help the Ice Warriors? Eventually, he's able to convince the Magmaclin to stand down and leave the Ice Warriors be, and he also helps the Magmaclin find a new home. The third episode would have been The Stones of Venice, written by Paul Mars. This story would have saw the Doctor and Jean visiting Venice in the year 2294, where it's expected to finally sink into the sea. Some see it as a natural disaster, while others believe it to be the result of a curse made 100 years ago by a woman named Estella, the wife of an aristocrat named Orsino, as before she assumedly drowned, Orsino was cursed with immortality, and the town was cursed to sink. The story sees Jean being kidnapped by a group of gondoliers, who are mutant people who have adapted to live in the water, and is forced to pretend to be Estella resurrected, and trick Orsino into believing she's Estella, so that his people could have Venice returned to him. It turns out that Estella was in fact an alien from another world, and that she didn't drown, but instead disappeared, and went under the name of Miss Lavish. Eventually, she reveals herself to Orsino, and we learn that the curse was a side effect of the technology of our people. In the end, Estella and Orsino sacrifice themselves, and the curse is reversed, with Venice being saved. The fourth episode would have been Minuet in Hell, written by Alan W. Lear and Gary Russell. This story would have been set in the fictional state of America named Melbourne, and with the sword return of Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart. The story would have been about a religious evangelist named Brigham, who works with a demon-like creature named the Marchosis to empty the human race of their minds, providing ready-made vessels for the psionivores. This would have been a very cheesy B-movie type of story. Many things happen in this story, including the Doctor losing his memories and believing he's in hell, a person named Gideon Crane believing himself to be the Doctor due to his mind being temporarily fused with the Doctor, and Jean being forced to work in the Hellfire Club. The 5th episode would have been Witchcraft, written by Steve Lyons. This story would have been set in Elizabethan era England. The story would have been about a man named Mr. Harrison, an old librarian who used to be terrified by even the thought of magic, played by Derek Jacobi. When the Doctor and Jean arrive in town, they hear rumours that Mr. Harrison is in fact a wizard. At first they pass it off as just a stupid rumour, but when they see blue lightning strike, they begin to believe the locals. They begin to investigate more into Mr. Harrison, and they soon discover that Harrison isn't a wizard or human, but in fact the Master, in a new stolen body. It turns out that the Master is attempting to summon a mythical creature named the Blair, which the Master hopes can alter his human DNA into Time Lord DNA, and grant him a new regeneration cycle. The Master summons the Blair by having lightning strike a mirror, but it turns out that the Blairs are mindless creatures that do nothing but destroy. The rest of the story sees the Master being forced to team up with the Doctor to send the Blair back where it came from before it can destroy Earth. The Blair is eventually defeated when the Doctor is able to send it back through the mirror. With the Blair now gone, the Doctor goes to confront the Master, but he escapes in his TARDIS, which is disguised as an old house. The 6th episode would have been The Chimes of Midnight, written by Robert Sherman. The Doctor and Jean arrive in an Edwardian house in 1928, and on Christmas Eve. They initially find the house to be empty, but soon notice that they can't interact with anything in the house. Pulling a Christmas cracker ends up rewinding it so it isn't pulled, and nothing can be written in the dust. However, they soon discover that they can make some impact by burning stuff in the fireplace, which causes the flames to move. And then, as the chimes strike, they find themselves to have been transported to where they were, but different, as the house is now packed with servants. The two of them soon come wrapped in a murder mystery plot, where servants are being killed in a series of bizarre murders exactly on the hour, and the Doctor and Jean are forced to play detective. However, they soon discover that when the chimes strike midnight, time reverses back to 10 PM. Eventually, the Doctor learns that the house, Edward Grove, is responsible for the murders, as it becomes sentient. The Doctor decides it's too dangerous to remain and attempts to flee in the TARDIS. However, Edward Grove takes over the TARDIS and traps them in the loop. The Doctor talks to Edward as he's possessed the servant and learns that the origin of the paradox that made Edward Grove was the maid Edith Thompson, who committed suicide in 1952 after learning about Jean's death, but now lacked a reason to do so, now having met her in 1928. The Doctor has the servant strangle him to death in order to reach Jean and Edith. Together, he and Jean convince Edith of her self-worth, undoing the paradox, as she now never committed suicide. As the Doctor and Jean leave, Jean reveals that she has memories of dying, despite not dying, and the Doctor begins to realise the consequences of his actions. The final episode would have been Cracked Time, written by Colin Brake. This would have been the final story for Hugh Bonneville as the Doctor and would have concluded the Web of Time arc. The story begins with the TARDIS in flight and we see the Doctor and Jean in conversation. After the last story, Jean now knows that her not dying is a bad thing. The Doctor is trying to calm her down when suddenly the TARDIS stops. Then the TARDIS begins to shudder, and we see outside the TARDIS that a beam of light is pulling it down to Gallifrey. On Gallifrey, the Doctor and Jean are greeted by Romana. She takes them to her office, where she explains everything to them. She explains that because Jean has not died, the Web of Time has cracked. She shows on a scanner everywhere the two of them have been this season. However, everywhere appears glitchy and corrupted, as time is destroying itself. Romana says that the universe will keep on destroying itself until there's nothing left. After a brief silence, the Doctor asks if there's no alternative. Romana looks up something on her computer and tells the Doctor that there may be one other way to save her, but it's highly dangerous. Long ago in the early days of Gallifrey, Rassilon and one of the other founding fathers named the Other created a machine that would cancel out a person's existence named Cordis. The machine was used to pause a person's life, but they still live. Their heart and organs will be paused forever, but they can still move and exist, as if nothing happened. Though you aren't immortal. Realizing the dangerous potential this machine had, they exiled it to another universe. Gallifrey can send the Doctor and Jean into this universe, but only them, as it's a dangerous journey. The Doctor agrees, and after some preparation plus some modifications to the TARDIS, a gateway is opened up, and the TARDIS is thrown into the unnatural universe. Inside the universe, the Doctor lands on a small dead red world, where they find Cordis. They power it on, but find the main drive to be damaged, with 3 of the pieces missing. However, using Cordis, they're able to locate the pieces missing on 3 separate worlds. So the Doctor and Jean head off in the TARDIS to go to the first planet. However, while in flight, the Doctor begins to hear a whisper in his head, chuckling, and saying that they shouldn't have come here. They arrive on the first planet and get involved in a situation similar to part 5 and 6 of the Keys of Marinus, where Jean is accused of murder and theft of the piece to Cordis, and the story becomes a courtroom drama, and the resolution to this part of the story sees the Doctor and Jean taking down the real murderer and theft, before they themselves steal the piece and escape in the TARDIS. As they head for the second planet, the Doctor becomes more and more concerned about the voice in his head, as it's causing him great pain. They then arrive on the second planet and find themselves in an alien town. They begin looking for the missing piece, however they discover something's wrong. They discover that an unknown entity, similar to the voice in the Doctor's head, has killed and possessed everyone on the planet, waiting for a way off world. When it discovers the Doctor and Jean, it plans to kill them both and escape to other worlds. However, the Doctor and Jean is able to reclaim the missing piece, which in turn kills the entity, and everyone on the planet collapses to the ground. Jean is upset at first, as she thinks they've killed them all, but the Doctor has to remind them that the entity killed them all. All they've done is let the bodies rest at last. And with that, they return to the TARDIS to seek out the last planet. Again, the voice begins to grow in the Doctor's mind, and now it seems the voice is taking over the Doctor himself, as it's slowly beginning to take control of the Doctor's body and speech. The voice reveals that he's a soul without a body, and he's found one within the Doctor. And once the Doctor's soul is dead, he'll escape into the other universe and destroy it, and there's nothing the Doctor can do. The only way to get rid of him is if he dies. They then arrive on the last planet. They find nothing on the planet, just a ginormous old mansion. Suspecting that the piece is in there, they enter the mansion in search of the last piece. However, the two quickly find themselves separated from each other. They soon begin to hallucinate their greatest fears as they begin to look for the last piece. We see Jean and even the Doctor becoming scared for their life as they're confronted with some of their greatest fears. We see Jean's fears, a possessed Edith Thompson, the Veterans, and death itself. But with the Doctor, we never see his fear, just a shadow. Eventually, however, Jean finds the last piece, and the two of them escape the mansion. They then return to the TARDIS and travel back to the planet hosting Cordis. On the planet hosting Cordis, the Doctor fixes Cordis and reattaches the missing pieces, but as he gets closer to finishing the machine, the voice in the Doctor's mind begins to fully possess him, and the two souls are in a struggle for control. The voice then briefly takes over and tries to attack Jean, which knocks her out. However, the Doctor kicks back in and holds back the voice for now. He checks Jean to make sure she's still alive, and the Doctor prepares to activate Cordis. However, he discovers a catch. In order to power Cordis, it requires energy, and the Doctor works out the only energy he can produce is himself, so he wires himself into Cordis as a sacrifice. The voice begins to take over and try and stop the Doctor, but the Doctor is too strong. Jean awakes at the last second and sees the Doctor pulling down a switch, which fries his body to a crisp, but activates Cordis. We see the Doctor screaming in pain, as well as the voice screaming, as it slowly burns out of the Doctor, as the Doctor slowly burns alive. The machine powers down and Jean is safe. Her life is now paused forever, and the universe is safe from cracking. She comforts the burnt Doctor. He slowly awakens and tells her to get him to the TARDIS before it's too late. On board the TARDIS, the Doctor sets the ship into flight and pilots out of the universe, while setting a destination to Earth, before collapsing to the ground. He tells Jean that his number is up and that he'll be going soon. He explains regeneration to her, before a glow of energy begins to cover the Doctor's head and hands. We see the scars melt off the Doctor, and his physical appearance is reshaped and regenerated. And the story ends with the regeneration complete, and we're introduced to the new Doctor, who'd be portrayed by Aidan Gillen. And with that, the episode ends. And that concludes season 36 of Doctor Who. A fairly mixed season overall, and a good final farewell to the Barnfather era and Bonneville era. So join me next time for season 37 of Doctor Who. Until then, thank you for watching and goodbye.